Taste that? It tastes like One Piece chapter 1152. And it tastes delicious. Oh, you obviously knew we were gonna do a review for this chapter One Piece, because even though it's a very simple chapter, there is enough information about characters that we really care about that I think requires a deeper dive, a much deeper dive than we did for our reaction, for sure. And it feels like Oda, he may be going into a prolonged flashback with Hara. It's possible. Oden flashback? Unlikely. But because we're getting stuff that involves characters that we care about in terms of characterization and in terms of story content, and now we're getting insight on how to potentially take down the pseudo-immortals that are the Holy Knights, which can then go beyond that to the Elders and potentially Imu itself. What Oda is establishing here is pivotal material for the future of the series on multiple fronts. Most of them are in your face, but some are hidden. You have to really ponder and think about. And that's why this review is here, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. But if you haven't seen my reaction to this chapter, you can check it out, the full thing, on my Cole Requiem YouTube channel, or you can see the reaction we did on this channel uploaded a few days ago. And as per usual for this video review, we're gonna break it down by its three main components. We have, of course, the pace and chapter structure, we have the character components of the chapter, and we have finally the story progression components of the chapter. But before we get any theory crafting, which requires no theory crafting or a deep dive, is a brief word from today's sponsor. This video is brought to you by Surfshark VPN. Phishing attempts, cyber attacks, all the nasty hoo-ha malware and viruses that are out there in the World Wide Web. You need protection in your day-to-day life. Make sure that when you venture to these insane spots on the web, you are secure. And I know, my anime manga faithful, we go to some crazy, gnarly spots on the web. To each their own, but you do need a shield when you venture off into these dangerous parts of the woods, and let Surfshark VPN be that shield. Not only does it have anti-malware, antivirus features, but also it does have IP changing functionalities wherein which wherever you are, no one will know who you are. So Surfshark VPN can clean all that nasty stuff that is going to try and harm your device, and it doesn't matter which device it is. Whether it's Windows, whether it's Macintosh or Linux, whether it's on your desktop, laptop, phone, iPad, you name it, Surfshark VPN has you covered on all your devices, and it's available in so many different countries across the entire world. And one of the things I do absolutely hate is region gating, and I love how Surfshark VPN can circumnavigate region gating with the region change feature. So there are certain shows, animes, movies that I want to check out that, let's say normally I can't on Netflix, on Hulu, you name it. Well, I can easily change my region, and then voila, I can gain access to that material, to those shows that normally I couldn't gain access to. So if you like what you hear, and you absolutely should, scan this QR code right here, don't be shy, or you can go in the box below to the website surfshark.com/KOL and get 4 extra months off of your purchase of Surfshark VPN. So, lads and ladies, on that note, let us get back to the video content at hand. Now let's get right into it with, first of all, the pace and chapter structure for this chapter One Piece. And for this chapter, we have 4 parts, essentially. You have 1, in real time, the general hell area, the underworld area of Elbaf, where you have Luffy, Scopper, and company. They have some sort of like gondola ship ride that they could take up to the higher areas of Elbaf. But this party may have semi-separated because you do have Zoro, Sanji, and a few members of the Giant Pirate crew. They're going to this boat to go up to the high areas now, while Luffy and Hiruden, they stay back and listen to a story that Loki has to offer. So are they gonna wait for Luffy and company to listen to the story and then leave, and then Luffy and Loki go up to the high areas of Elbaf later on in the arc? That's the first part. Then the second part is that we kick off a flashback, and it's from Loki's POV, where it's Loki essentially when he first went to the castle and how he first saw what happened to King Harald. But then we cut away from that Loki POV to a Scarborough Gabon POV, where Skywalker Gaban was talking to Shanks at his pad in a nearby area on the same day when him and Shanks checked out what was going on in the castle when they felt that weird hockey. And then from there, we get a flashback within a flashback where we jump from 14 years in the past to 109 years in the past to when King Harald was a much younger individual, and when he was gallivanting across the entire world, people across the entire world feared the giant pirate crew the most out of any pirate crew at this point in time, and Harald, according to the narrator, was a low-life scumbag. Some folks would say he looks like Kai when he was younger. I would say, honestly, he looks like Sai from Kano Kuni. It's almost one for one. It's kind of crazy. Tattoos over his eye, more uniquely so over his left eye. And then you have his horns, which are very different, let's say Kaido's horns, or Kaido's horns branch out to the side more. His horns are way more straightforward, like Loki's horns. And these are the horns that eventually in the future he would remove. So that is it when it comes to the pace chapter structure. It was good. I think for the most part, when Oda is like under 5 parts, it's actually pretty good. The less parts there is, for the most part, the better the chapter is. And this chapter, I think, was overall, for pace and structure, pretty good. Now, the character components for this chapter One Piece are also pretty simple. They really are. But one of them requires a little more finagling and theory crafting, like, wait a minute, what's going on here? What? First of all, Zoro, it is revealed in this chapter that he, in fact, was not aware that he had awakened Conqueror's Haki. Now, it is debated by many fans as to when exactly he awakened Conqueror's Haki, but the idea is clear that he fully manifested his Conqueror's Haki in Wano Country, or I guess on Wano Country. Folks point to that moment against the random dudes on Shibuya Archipelago during the pre-time skip where they were surrounding Zoro. Zoro kind of glared at them. They ran away because they were scared. As some Conqueror's Haki, it could very well be, but it's nowhere near as clear as, let's say, for example, when Luffy knocked out Motobaro in the arc before in the Duval arc. Motobaro, that bull, got psyched out and actually got knocked out when Luffy glared at it at a certain point during the arc. That is a clear and very distinct sign of Luffy's Conqueror's Haki, whereas with Zoro, the next arc after on Shiboni, it's still very unclear. Zoro has been able to utilize Conqueror's Haki for about 2 arcs now, though at rare times and not really, let's say, maximalizing it. But now we know why. And the reason why is because Zoro never knew. So when a lot of folks, I remember this debate is still ongoing, honestly. Why don't you see Zoro and Luffy utilize Conqueror's Haki infusion against the Seraphim to try and bypass their natural physiques and actually do damage to them despite their flames being on? Now, to be fair, Luffy's way more of a question mark there because he actually knows how to utilize Conqueror's Haki infusion, but Zoro never did. So this is a very nice reveal because it does add some context to previous situations in the past that needed some clarity about, well, why isn't Zoro doing X, Y, and Z and the other? No. It's because Zoro didn't know. All Zoro does in chapter 1033 is that he decides to give as much Haki as he possibly can to Enma, and in doing so, he kind of skips a step and goes right into Conqueror's Haki infusion. He's kind of unaware of what's really going on, and Gaban is the guy to break the ice. But he does so in a pretty aggressive way, where he actually scolds Zoro for being unaware of his own abilities. Now, to be fair, Luffy knew, and Luffy could have told Zoro this, but remember, Luffy is sub 40 IQ. You are expecting far too much for a man whose IQ would barely allow him to pass the 8th grade. However, here's what Gaban says. Unbelievable. Haki is a power that's only useful when you consciously control it. How do you expect to support your captain, an Emperor of the Sea, without knowing that? Zoro, sorry. This, I think, is a direct callback to the pre-time skip when Rayleigh first shows Luffy Conqueror's Haki in chapter 597. In that chapter, after that big elephant is knocked out, he says this, but don't use it, referring to Conqueror's Haki, too much until you have it fully under your control, or you'll end up overwhelming people you don't intend to. Because Zoro was having his Conqueror's Haki just flowing out of him, uncontrolled, that ignorance and that carelessness is dangerous, because Zoro could be unintentionally affecting other folks around him in negative ways, because Luffy could have gone through that same process, but Luffy got lucky he had Rayleigh to teach him. So Gaban it's actually in a very similar way to how Zoro reacted to Luffy in chapter 1124. Zoro was mad at Luffy for getting so upset about what happened with Vegapunk because you're a member of the sea. You're better than this. And I think Gaban has the same mentality with Zoro here. You're a crew member of a Yonko crew. You have Conqueror's Haki you don't even know? Shape up. What are you doing? After that, we have Shanks. And for Shanks, it's pretty simple. Shanks had a tattoo, a mark on his upper left arm about 14 years ago. And we don't know when he first got it, but nonetheless, he had it. And this mark is a very similar mark that's shown on the armbands of Summers and Kiringram when they first pop in chapter 1140. This might be genuinely the mark of the abyss that they use to teleport from one location to another location. In chapter 1138, it was revealed by Shamrock that Shanks at one point in time did visit the Holy Land. But also keep in mind that according to Shamrock, Shanks and the Figure Land family are estranged. Shanks prefers the quote-unquote filth of the lower world. So it's interesting that Shanks has this tattoo because this tattoo may not just be the mark of the abyss. That mark, let's say BOEC in chapter 1140 on Summers' arm when he first comes in, when he's first teleported in, where you see this gigantic tattoo on his arm with like fire and these orbs and so on and so forth. Not just the armband symbol that we see. So the options I would say right now for Shanks' tattoo are, number one, again, it's the mark of the abyss that Emu marked on him. Number two is that it's actually a family sigil, where this relates to the Figureland family specifically, and other families have similar marks to indicate their house in the Holy Land. Number three, it could be Holy Knight related, where it seems unlikely, but maybe it's a mark of Holy Knights, where Holy Knights have this mark somewhere either on their bodies or on armbands, or both. Or number four, it could actually be related to something we saw in the Doflamingo flashback, where in the Dofi flashback, I think in the anime, they could have shown us this, but in the manga, they don't. Chapter 763, when Homing brings his family to the lower world, the people on the Celestial Dragon ship, they say, and now I will take your Celestial Dragon ID chips. So there's some sort of verification, some sort of chip, some sort of mark, brand, whatever it is, something that indicates or verifies that someone is a celestial dragon. And maybe the Holy Knight version or certain families have that mark on their armbands or on their bodies to indicate that they are celestial dragons. So let's say folks like Gunko or folks like Shanks, because they were in the lower world for a long period of time and then they're brought to the Holy Land, they get it actually tattooed on their body. But if you're born there, you're just gonna armband, you're fine. Some of that sort. It may not just be the mark of the abyss. And I gave you 4 other options as what it could be. And I'll say number 5 too, real quick. Folks will say that, okay, well, it's a mark that also grants Shanks a immortality-like body at that point in time in his life. The only problem is that we know that Blackbeard scarred him. So if he got scarred by Blackbeard, who has, as far as you know, no Conqueror's Haki, or no Yami Yami no Mi, so then how is someone like Shanks getting scarred if he has an immortal body? Doesn't really add up. So it's very unlikely that this mark is the reason why, let's say, people like Gunko or Summers or probably Shamrock and the elders, why they have immortality factor. But whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, what Oda is doing here is that he's actually inserting, I think, retroactively, a more reasonable explanation as to why Shanks had his arm bit off by the Lord of the Coast. So if it is the mark of the abyss, and let's say, for example, Shanks was forced to be teleported to Emu's location, well, it's actually not Shanks, it's Lord of the Coast. The Lord of the Coast, who was chilling in the sea somewhere, Little Mermaid style, under the sea, boop, all of a sudden now is in the Holy Land with Emu. What? Homeboy got teleported to Holy Land, but Rosewald had to deal with the Lord of the Coast. Rosewald ate the Lord of the Coast, and then he accidentally became immortal through those means. So that's how when Sai and Leo do their crazy combo, Homeboy Pod agree, but he's still alive because he has immortality factor that he got from consuming Lord of the Coast after he beat him 1v1 when Emu summoned the Lord of the Coast. Big brain energy. Massive brain energy. Hell yeah, baby. But on that point, being teleported forcibly, if Shanks was marked by the mark of the abyss, then why didn't Emu forcibly teleport Shanks to the Holy Land when the Red Pirates attacked Who's Who and his boys when they were transporting the Gum fruit? Why wouldn't Emu just do that? Because what Shanks and company did would be against protocol if he was actually working with Shanks way back when. But again, we already know, according to Shamrock, that they are estranged. And when you do dive into it on a deeper note, Luffy in some way liberated Shanks. As he said to Whitebeard, he put a bet on the next generation. And Luffy, Gum Fruit, or Nika ability, whichever one he knew, he put his bets on Luffy. He decided to have his arm get consumed by the Law of the Coast willingly. There was a theory about that I think someone mentioned in my chat, I want to say like a few weeks ago, like earlier in the month or last month, about the idea that Shanks was marked with the Mark of the Abyss and then got eaten by the Law of the Coast purposefully. That was a play. Now, there's no way on God's green earth that Oda had planned that out day one. No, no, absolutely not. That was done in hindsight, retroactively. But it is a good way to give actual legitimate onus as to why, hold on, Shanks is all this OD hockey, right? Just hockey up. Duh. No, it was done deliberately. But it is, I think, hard to call it a retcon because we never really knew why it happened in the first place, considering Shanks' power. It didn't make any sense. We're not changing the events as to why they happen, but more so the reasons to why it happened per se. Luffy was a part of that for sure. Like, actually the main onus for that, obviously. But a sprinkle of that is also because he wanted to cut his ties with the Holy Land in some respects. So that I think is a pretty like major revelation, and I did of course theory craft a bit too much there, but at the same time it's important theory crafting because it relates to Shanks. Me and Luffy, when it comes to Shanks, we're on the same wavelength. If it involves Shanks, it's massively important. It's mega important. That is the second come over character. And number 3 is simply put Harald, where Harald does get stabbed by many giants, but is still seemingly active, so that does note to him having some degree of immortality factor, obviously. And when he was younger, he was one hell of a brat. He was on some Bart Simpson activity at Kaiju class, running around doing wrestling stunts on castles. Yeah. So he was a menace, absolutely, without a doubt. But that's it so far for Harald's character. And that is all for the character components for this chapter. Now we get into the story progression components for this chapter. And the first major component for story progression for this arc is that we are seeing a few members of the giant pirate crew. They're making their way up to the, at least they're going to make their way up to the Sun Realm, and it looks like Zoro and Sanji are coming with them. But that being said, bottom crew, the bottom clique, they're gonna make their way up because we actually get to see, we see one of the I mean, these bolts are huge because this bridge from the Roto Castle to the Sun Realm, this is by no means a small bridge. It goes for miles, man. And this one bolt of hockey is huge. Actually, on the same note of hockey, and this is a very important detail for not only this arc, but for the future of the story. Gabon tells Luffy to be mindful of how you utilize your Supreme King Haki. They are not immortal. This, I think, calls on the idea that Haki is the transcending all things. Well, Conqueror's Haki is the transcending all things bit that Kaido mentioned way back when. And it's because if you can utilize Conqueror's Haki in a certain way, you can shut down even powers like what we see with Summers and Kiringram, all the quote-unquote immortality factors. But then number 2, he says they're not immortal. Is it because Conqueror's Haki can shut down their mortality, or fundamentally they're not really immortal? Like, let's say in the same way as the Elders, or maybe the Elders themselves aren't really immortal either, because we saw how even, let's say, remove its powers from Jay Garcia Saturn, and then Jay became a skeleton right then and there. They're not necessarily immortal, but they're immortal as long as their powers are connected to the source. The Holy Knights have internet immortality that Gabon was shutting down with his Conqueror's Haki. He turned off the router. He shut off the modem. And they had no longer that access to immortality, even though we do see how Summers is still alive, even though he was cut in half and so on. At the same time, too, back then, Gabon said that he was rusty. This may require another video in itself for a deeper Haki dive, potentially. But I think I get the idea here where, because Haki, willpower, can probably negate certain attributes of abilities, if not abilities wholesale, it's also removing the connectivity of where that ability is coming from. And it also looks like Loki is in on that sauce too. When Loki swung Ragnir in 1142, we see that massive lightning ball, of course, but then also we kind of see in that same chapter black. I'm thinking they're black bolts that come from the side as well. And that's probably Conqueror's Haki, though at times hard to tell. I was able to verbalize my own power, and in that case, I've experienced it for myself. The Holy Knights can be stopped. It looks like this relates to either A, his experience he had with Harald, his father, where it may have involved the Holy Knight in some respects, and he's able to actually stop them, or his father was going through immortality factor in some way, and with his own haki could stop his own father back then, 14 years ago, or B, it refers to his power, because I think in the scan version, it feels more like he's talking about his own power, his different power that he's probably consumed, the hidden ability, the OP ability that we haven't seen yet, but it could just be haki because someone did mention in my tier 3 chat that, yeah, he is making this statement right after Gaban mentions Conqueror's Haki, Supreme Haki being an important detail that's necessary against these pseudo-immortals. So I digress. It probably just confirms more or less that he does have Conqueror's Haki and he was able to do something to an immortal, whether it be a Holy Knight or his own father way back when, and now he wants to go up there and help as well. Which is, of course, is throwing off Hyrule. Like, what are you talking about? You? Help? Elbath? No. Please. It's a lie. Never. But before we get to that, we do have the whole thing about, you know, Zoro with Gaban, and we do have Sanji memeing. And we find out that Zoro just found out the Conqueror's Haki. So for the future of this arc, Zoro's gonna make some pretty damn good gains, because even though Zoro has an affinity for armament haki, Conqueror's Haki usage, still being able to work on that is going to be very important for Zoro's strength in the future. So like, for example, it looks like Gaban has Conqueror's Haki, but he, I think, is very proficient in observation haki. That's like his main thing. So you can still be proficient in skill of other haki types, but your prima is still the observation haki, at least with Gaban, and with Zoro, armor haki. If we have a situation, it won't be the Red for some reason, or other forces, but it's gonna be the Straw Hats that deal with the Holy Knights. I wouldn't go as far as say the Elders. That could be a bit too much, honestly. But if the Straw Hats have to fight Holy Knights in the future, Zoro being able to utilize Conqueror's Haki appropriately at that point in time is gonna be a huge boon. But then we get to my boy Sanji. And Sanji right now, he's memeing, having a hard time. Like, bro, like, please, listen, I'm tired of my bounty being lower than Jinbei and Zoro's. And obviously, it's Oda ragging on Sanji because for Wano Country, he had a higher bounty than Zoro did, and he was rubbing in Zoro's face. So that's what it is, competitiveness between these guys. Gio's not a part of it, but it's part of the banter between Zoro and Sanji, how it is. And then Sanji asks Gaban a question about, like, what about me? What about my Conqueror's Haki, my COC? And it looks like Sanji got told something, but it was shouted over by Loki. He starts yelling like, "This is pathetic, Hyrule. Like, come on." Oda, he does this a lot with Sanji, where he will go out of his way to hide certain details about Sanji's growth, and then we won't find out until like later on in the arc/series. Like, for example, way back when Sanji fought Pearl and Baratier, Sanji's able to stand comfortably in like a sea of fire all around him. And Oda revealed in SBS later on that was because Sanji has a natural heat resistance. Though I guess that one you could argue is like too far back in the past. A more recent example would, let's say, be during Wano Country, when Sanji beat Queen in chapter 1035, the next chapter over, Sanji faints, passes out. And then Osom takes care of him, but you don't see Sanji's face. Not only does Oda deliberately hide Sanji's face at that point in time, but also Oda hid his face in the following chapter's color cover, 1036, where in that color cover, Sanji's face is also hidden. It's not until later on in that very same chapter do we see Sanji lying down and the eyebrows changed back to his usual eyebrow. So it became more of a question as to why Sanji passed out in the first place. Was it because of the fight itself? Was it because his powers deactivated? Was it a combination of the two? Was it also because of the mental anguish that he had suffered as a result of his body changing and mutating and believing that he broke one of his codes, hitting a lady for the first time? And would that be over now that his eyebrows had returned back to normal? So there are various subtle things that were in question now that we kind of saw the truth that Oda had hid for about 2 chapters. So with Sanji, Oda kind of plays these games. Now it's a suspense of, hold on now. What did Gaban tell Sanji, if at all anything? A. B. If he did tell him something, does it pertain to Conqueror's Haki? C. Does it pertain to something else entirely? And then also D. If it is about something entirely, how would Gaban even know that? Maybe because he went to Laugh Tale and he knows the truth about the world, then maybe he also knows about hidden elements, hidden powers that we don't have clear understanding of, which a lot of Sanji's powers are somewhat unclear even to this day. Now, we do see, Hiruden yelling at Loki because Loki apparently had done these atrocities. And then Gabon also wants to have Loki unchained, but Hiruden tells him, hold on, that's insane. He's killed 113 soldiers in the castle 14 years ago, gave Chief Jarul that sword wound he has, and slaughtered his own father. But during all that, by the way, Loki, join my crew, Monkey D. Luffy. Now, I'm with Zoro and Sanji. No. And yes, obviously, folks know I want Yamato in the crew, which she will be, and that'll be a video in the future because it makes the most sense where Oda's going right now with Yamato, which is why the cover story is still going on. Peep game. I was against this massively because I saw a massive issue where Loki is way too massive to fit on the Sunny-Go. It makes no damn sense for him to be able to fit on the Sunny-Go. Zero. Not a nilch. And the excuses I heard during my stream were bananas. Like, hey, well, hold on now. Why can't Frankie just make the Sunny-Go effectively like 15 times larger? Just as large or even bigger than the giant ship that Dorian Broggie pulled up with Egghead Island. So basically you want a whole new ship for just one crew member. What? Or the owl in the library, Wang Shitan, would pull up and actually shrink Loki down to a sizable individual so he could fit in the ship. So the owl would be like essentially his Hattori. And remember, the owl can only shrink inanimate objects, not living things. Disgusting. The lengths folks are going to try and make it make sense to have this behemoth, something that is significantly larger than the entire Sunny-Go. And remember this, we have seen images of giants like Goldberg carry the entire Sunny-Go over his head, like a woman in sub-Saharan Africa carrying food over her head, dog. In chapter 1132, that's exactly what we see. How on earth, and to be fair, Oda is not the best with size scaling. He's really not. But at the same time, many mangaka are very consistent. Style will take preference over appropriate scale, for sure. This happens all the damn time. In multiple panels, you see Goldberg carrying the Sunny-Go. In multiple panels, that's Goldberg. And Goldberg is 2.5 times at the bare minimum smaller than Loki. Huh? Foul. It's a foul on the play. Unless the devil fruit that he consumed is akin to Loki's powers from mythology, which means that the guy can transform his physique at will and be damn near anything he wants to be. A mouse, he can be a caterpillar, he can be something really damn small and be on the Sunny-Go just fine. If that's what happens, then fine. That one I just gotta accept. In reality, if it's just the way he is now and he doesn't have that kind of power, he's not gonna be on the Sunny-Go. I don't care if they make a giant raft and have him like sit. No. It would be ridiculous. The only thing that works is that power, or he's actually a member of the Grand Fleet, essentially in the future. Obviously, the streets would rage if he had an Uwu form, a merch form, but if it makes him fit on the ship, we're better off for it. Now, from there, after all this, we do get a flashback. And again, I don't know if Luffy and Hiruden and Loki are going to stay here and the other guys leave. I'm not too sure. Zoro does accuse Luffy being a Shanks obsessed fool, which he is, and I am too, for sure. People of the right sense are on that bandwagon, absolutely. The idea is that we go into a flashback now, and we do see Loki and we do see Jarul when they're younger, 14 years ago, though for Jarul, quote unquote, younger. And Loki doesn't have Ragnir. He has a mallet, or maybe that is Ragnir, but transformed somehow. So you have Aur's Castle, or West Castle, however you want to say it, really. And we get to see Loki operate. He was causing violence immediately. But then we see Harald in the room getting stabbed up by all these giants. And there's a lot of blood, though it's kind of all silhouetted. But at the same time, it's probably a good case where he's going straight demon time. And it's also stemming for some Gabon content too, because Gabon and Shanks are there. We get to see the tattoo on his arm, which I already covered before in the character section of the video. We get to see Ripley and your colon. And seeing Shanks operate with 2 arms is strange. But essentially, we are getting a flashback, and we're getting now like a double layer flashback in that too, because now we're cutting back into time 109 years ago. If he did meet Elder / Emu, I want to see that. Harald, yeah, I do want to see that. There's a chance here where we don't see all the elders that we see today. What if we don't see Marcus Mars? Because at that point in time was an elder. There are things that are going to be very curious. Absolutely. We know that Saturn would be a member because Saturn, we did see talking to scientists in the Holy Land 200 years ago in chapter 1125. So Saturn, we do know was an elder back then. But were there any changes or not? That's something I do want to see for sure. And if not, then maybe all the current elders became elders around the same time. And if that's the case, why is it the case? But either way, that's theory crafting. We'll find out in the future. So on that note, this chapter, obviously I'm doing a video on it. So this chapter is a great chapter. It is a great chapter, One Piece. I'm giving of a 8 or 8.5 out of 10. Even though it's simple, it does do, I think, a lot for in terms of theory and building up stuff for the future, for the story, for power scaling, for narratives. And when it comes to theories, it's theories for folks that we care about. At least an 8 out of 10 for this week's chapter of One Piece. Let me know your thoughts on the subject matter at hand. If you enjoy your boy's video content, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, click on that bell to join the notification squad. I'm gonna catch you guys and gals on the flip side.